The verdict. The tribunal chamber hummed with the sterile chill of recycled air. Cale's palms pressed against the icy metal railing, his breath fogging the visor of his containment suit. Above, the dome ceiling revealed the ink-black void, punctuated by Earth's ghostly blue glow. "Cale Vera," intoned the overseer, their voice echoing with icy authority. "For sabotage of the Helios Array and treason against the Lunar Accord, you are sentenced to execution." The word hung in the air, sharp and final. The overseer paused as if savouring the weight of their next words. "By solar exposure." A murmur rippled through the scant, shadowy observers gathered at the periphery. Cale's throat tightened. Not the quick void of space, nor the merciful choke of a Thanatos berry. The sun. His knees buckled, but the guard's grip on his arms was iron. "No," his voice cracked. "Please." Panic sharpened his words. Vacuum, poison, cryo, anything else. The overseer's lips curved faintly beneath their hood, their shadowed face betraying a flicker of satisfaction. "Only the sun can purify the evil you have done," he said, his tone sharp and unyielding. "This is the ultimate justice." Cale's nails dug into his palms. Justice? It's barbarism. Sadism. His voice rang desperate, but the robed figures loomed above him like jagged shadows, unmoved and implacable. The guard behind him yanked Cale's head back, forcing his gaze upward. Beyond the dome, only blackness stretched, vast and unfeeling. "Enough," Justiciar Soren spoke, his tone cold like he had not known Cale since childhood. "We are civilized, after all." The overseer inclined their head slightly before speaking again. "The sentence is irrevocable and immediate." Their words cut through the air like a blade. "Take him away." The Crucible. The lunar surface was dangerous. Cale had assumed they would suit him up and march him across the rocks to his death, but instead they stuffed him into a pressurized loading dolly with less care than you would show to rubbish. Through its viewing window, meant for inspecting cargo, he caught one final glimpse of the stark lunar landscape. The endless fields of dust and stone stretched toward the horizon, beautiful in their desolation. The sight filled him with an unexpected melancholy. The chamber was a sarcophagus of glass and steel, a repurposed observatory with its telescope removed. He paced the perimeter like a caged animal, fingers trailing along the seamless walls, searching for any weakness. Above him, a hexagonal lattice of quartz panels glimmered faintly where a radiation shield had once been, the glass still bearing the ghostly marks of careful astronomical calculations. The room was bare, save for a central pedestal etched with the symbols of the Lunar Accord: scales, swords, and starbursts. The airlock had sealed with a final echoing click. He tested it anyway, pressing his weight against the smooth metal, but it might as well have been part of the moon itself. His hands moved frantically across the walls, probing for seams, latches, imperfections, anything. But there was nothing. Only smooth, unbroken surfaces of reinforced quartz and steel. No door, no exit. Cold seeped into his skin as he completed another circuit of his cage. His steps quickened with each lap, the soft tap of his boots against metal grating marking time like a countdown. Above, the black void yawned, indifferent, but at the chamber's eastern edge, a sliver of white light crept along the lunar horizon. Dawn. He had crippled the Helios Array, detonated the reactor core, sent 1,000 mirrors spiraling into the void, let the earthbound warlords starve for their arrogance, let Soren's precious accord fracture. They'd taken her first. Lissa, with her firefly laugh and steady hands, vaporized in the decompression of Sector G12. A warning, they'd called it. A message to dissidents. "I'd do it again," Cale whispered, the words misting his visor. The chamber's chill gnawed at his exposed skin. He was hate. He was vengeance sculpted into flesh. But as the first tendril of sunlight licked the quartz roof, his throat clenched. Cale's fists tightened. This was theatre, a performance for the Accord's sycophants. They wanted him to scream, to beg, to validate their moral posturing. His crimes deserved death. Yes, a bullet, a blade. Not this slow unravelling. Of course, they were listening and watching, though Cale couldn't see a camera. He considered yelling profanities and wishing death on them all, but what good would putting on a show do? Then the quartz above began to glow. Ascension. It started as a blush. Sunlight seeped through the lattice, diffused and honey gold. Cale squinted. For a heartbeat, it was beautiful, the way the light fractured into prismatic threads, painting the chamber in a liquid emerald and violet. Then the heat began. At first it was a creeping warmth crawling over his exposed skin. He rolled his sleeves down instinctively, but the fabric provided no relief. The air thickened, charged with energy. His scalp prickled as beads of sweat formed and evaporated almost in the same breath. The heat surged, no longer subtle. Cale staggered back, instinctively shielding his face with his hands, though it did little good. The quartz above intensified, glowing white-hot as it funneled unfiltered solar radiation directly into the room. "No, no!" his voice cracked. He turned, looking for any shadow, any corner that might offer reprieve, but there was none. The walls glowed faintly, their surfaces designed to reflect and amplify the light, leaving no refuge. The first burn seared across his forearm. Cale gasped, clutching the spot as his skin reddened and bubbled, the pain sharp and immediate. Another wave of heat swept over him, blistering his shoulders and neck. His breath came in shallow, ragged gulps as his lungs began to ache with the oppressive heat. He stumbled to the pedestal in the centre of the room, pressing his back against its cool metal surface. But the relief was fleeting. The steel absorbed the radiant energy, warming rapidly beneath him. He pushed away, his hands trembling as the burns spread across his palms. The chamber filled with the scent of scorched flesh. Cale's vision blurred, his head swimming in a haze of heat and agony. He tried to focus. On the pedestal, on the etched symbols of the lunar accord, on anything, but the world dissolved into a shimmering white inferno. He fell to his knees, his strength ebbing. His mind drifted, fragments of memories flashing like bursts of static. Lissa's smile, bright and full of life. The quiet defiance in her voice as she whispered her dreams of freedom. They had taken her first. Now they were taking him. "I'm sorry," Cale whispered, though he wasn't sure if the words were for her or himself. His lips cracked and bled, the moisture evaporating before he could feel it. The sunlight bore down, relentless and all-consuming. His skin blackened and split, the agony now a dull roar as his nerves burned away. He slumped against the pedestal, his body trembling as the heat reached his core. With his last bit of energy, he threw himself toward the far wall. He pressed himself against the wall. It wasn't as bright there, where the light had first begun to seep in, trying to make himself as small as possible. At some point, he must have fallen. He didn't remember. But now he was on the ground, curled in a futile attempt to escape the heat. The last thing he saw before the world turned completely white was his leg bursting into flame. When the sun reached its zenith, there was nothing left. The quartz lattice cooled, its glow fading to a dim translucence. The chamber was silent once more. On the pedestal, only a shadow remained. A carbonized imprint etched into the surface. A final, fleeting reminder of a man and his silly revolution. Above, the stars watched, distant and indifferent,